Hi, it's Jen and welcome to my channel, and this video is part of my series where I look deeper into the neuroscience of depression. Now, I am wearing a serotonin necklace right now because so many people say, oh yeah, serotonin, it's the happy neurotransmitter. When people are suffering from depression, it's because there is less serotonin in their brain. But this is actually not completely true. You may know that there are SSRIs, which are drugs that block the reuptake of serotonin. So serotonin is in the synaptic cleft longer, and people believe that that is what is making people happier. But in this video, I will be kind of breaking down that myth and explaining why serotonin isn't actually the happiness drug that some people think that it is. I will link the playlist to the previous videos I made on depression in the description below. What you need to know for this video is that on average, people who have suffered from depression will have a smaller hippocampus than people who have not suffered from depression. It is theorized that the cause for the smaller hippocampus in people who have suffered from depression is due to both the destruction of cells in the hippocampus due to cortisol and stress, as well as a decrease in cell growth in the hippocampus of people who are suffering from depression. In this video, I will be explaining how serotonin affects cell growth in the hippocampus. So serotonin neurons are primarily found in clusters in the brainstem called raphe nuclei, and these neurons extend to the hippocampus. SSRI stands for serotonin reuptake inhibitor. As you can see, the presynaptic cell is the cell releasing serotonin. The postsynaptic cell has the serotonin receptors. Based on the type of receptor on the postsynaptic cell, a different signal will be relayed to the cell once activated by serotonin. I will go into more detail about the different types of serotonin receptors soon. There are also autoreceptors on the presynaptic cell. When a great deal of serotonin has been released, many serotonin molecules will be attached to the postsynaptic receptors, and some serotonin molecules will bind to the autoreceptors. When these receptors are bound to, they send a chemical signal to the presynaptic cell to stop releasing serotonin. Additionally, there is a reuptake transporter. The transporter allows serotonin to move from the synaptic cleft, which is the space between the presynaptic and the postsynaptic cell, back into the presynaptic cell. This allows for serotonin to be recycled. SSRIs block this transport, so more serotonin is in the synaptic cleft longer. Okay, so going back to the beginning where I mentioned that the hippocampus is smaller in people who have suffered from depression than people who have not suffered from depression. So it makes sense that an antidepressant that treats depression would also increase the cognitive effects that are damaged by depression. So throughout the rest of this video, I will be talking about how stimulating different types of serotonin receptors affects cognition. And I think that this would also relate to how it cures depression, because as the hippocampus is degraded, the symptoms of depression are increased, and so are the anti-cognitive effects. Therefore, pro-cognitive effects are also associated with a lack of depression and an increased hippocampus. So this is why I will be talking about the cognitive effects throughout the rest of this video. So here is a simple view of the principal cells, the most important cells in the hippocampus. The granule cells are in the dentate gyrus, and they relay information to the CA3 cells, which relay information to the CA1 cells. The activation of CA1 cells allows for learning and precognitive effects. Here is another view of these connections. This picture includes interneurons, as you can see in blue and green in this picture, and I've also circled them. Interneurons can either help to excite or inhibit the principal cell they form a synaptic connection with. This picture also shows that there are 8 different types of serotonin receptors in the hippocampus, and it also shows that each of these neurons have multiple different types of serotonin receptors on them. Based on the chemistry of each of the different types of serotonin receptors, some serotonin receptors increase the activity of the cell they are on, and some decrease the activity of the cell they are on. The research from this video came from the effect of serotonin on the hippocampus, and it referenced past studies on 8 different types of serotonin receptors. Most importantly, some increase learning and growth in the hippocampus, and some will decrease learning and growth in the hippocampus when they are excited by serotonin. Right here, I will summarize and simply tell you the cognitive impact that researchers have found upon stimulation of each of these types of receptors. For more information on each of these receptors, I have linked the article below, as well as a link where you can get my highlighted copy of this article. 5-HT1A has mixed effects when stimulated with serotonin. Some studies have shown that it increases cognition, and some have shown that it decreases cognition when this receptor is selectively stimulated in the hippocampus. For 5-HT1B and 1D, this has shown anti-cognitive effects. Stimulation of 5-HT2A and 2C is leaning towards anti-cognitive effects. 5-HT3 is anti-cognitive. 5-HT4 is pro-cognitive. 5-HT5 has not been studied yet. 5-HT6 is anti-cognitive, and 5-HT7 has mixed pro and anti-cognitive effects. Therefore, any treatment that just affects serotonin receptors will have mixed results on cognition, as well as depression, as increased neuronal growth and the hippocampus is correlated with decreased depression. Now I will tell you about a drug that better treats the anti-cognitive effects of depression better than SSRIs such as Prozac. This drug actually is selective towards what the effects it has on different serotonin receptors. For example, this drug is an antagonist to 5-HT3, and 5-HT3 we know has anti-cognitive effects when stimulated. An antagonist basically does the opposite of stimulate it. It stops this receptor from being activated. So again, it's an antagonist of 5-HT3 as well as an antagonist of 5-HT7, which has mixed effects, and it is also an antagonist of 5-HT1D. So that's good right there. We know it stops two serotonin receptors from being activated that we already know have anti-cognitive effects. This drug is also a partial agonist to 5-HT1B, which also is an anti-cognitive receptor. When something is a partial agonist, it binds to the receptor and causes the chemical reaction in the receptor to still occur, but at a slower rate than it would if serotonin was naturally binding to this receptor. So at low levels of serotonin, this is actually an agonist and allows for the process to occur, but at high levels, when there's high levels of serotonin in the presynaptic cleft, this partial agonist will actually slow down the reaction rate of that receptor. Therefore, it's kind of an antagonist when there are high levels of serotonin, and it is an agonist for 5-HT1A receptors, which have mixed cognitive effects. And like other SSRIs, it also blocks the reuptake of serotonin. In another study performed in rats, vortioxetine increased cell proliferation in the hippocampal dentate gyrus faster than Prozac. So it took 3 days for vortioxetine compared to 10 days for Prozac to grow the same amount of cells. Vortioxetine also produced a larger degree of hippocampal dendritic branching than Prozac did after 2 weeks of dosing in mice. In summary, based on my studies of this, serotonin is not as simple as I thought it was. I used to think that you could just increase serotonin in the brain and you would be happier and things affected by depression would be fixed just by increasing the levels of serotonin, but that is simply not true. Through doing this research, I've learned a lot that one of the biggest things that happens in depression is that the hippocampus is smaller in people who have suffered from depression. And just increasing the levels of serotonin has opposing effects on cell growth in the hippocampus. Therefore, I know that serotonin is not the clean answer to curing depression. I find the research of vortioxetine and selectively stimulating specific serotonin receptors to be very promising and very exciting. And it is very interesting to see that, at least in rats, that this drug seems to be much more effective than Prozac. And I feel like research should really be moving towards that, and we should be having this conversation in the mainstream much more often. In the description, I have a link where you can look at the notes for this video as well as the outline. I've also included a Facebook group that I just made, which is called the Neuroscience of Mental Health and Resilience. If you like learning about the neuroscience of mental health, I highly encourage you to join that group. And I also have a 7-day journaling challenge that I've done. It's called 7-Day Journaling Challenge for Hard Times. So if you're suffering through anything hard, you can access that link to do the challenge. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you liked it, please like it. If you want to share it with anyone, please share, and subscribe if you want to see more videos from me. I love talking about the neuroscience and mental health, and I also have a lot of videos on personal growth and overcoming hard things. So if you are interested in that, please check out the rest of my videos. All right, bye.